Welcome to the podcast. We Do Recover with Jared Miller, your host.
And I'm Dr. Terry Sellers, your co-host.
This is a podcast about recovery from addiction.
We want to talk about what successful recovery can look like.
Brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn.
Welcome to We Do Recover. This is episode 26. I'm your host, Jared Miller. Today I'm joined by your co-host, our medical expert, Dr. Sellers.
Good morning, everybody.
We also have here in the studio with us today the producer, Sean Donovan.
I'm just a producer.
That's right. And our featured guest, a friend of mine. She is one of the kindest, most sweetest people you'll ever meet. Tia, I blanked because I'm terrible with names. How do I pronounce the last name?
Bithell.
Bithell. Thank you. See, this just goes to show, none of us are perfect, right? I struggle with names. Bithell. Tia Bithell. All right. This podcast was recorded in sunny St. George, even though it is raining today, right, Tia?
Yeah, it's so cold.
Kind of cold, cloudy out there. Episode 26, part 1 is brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers, where addiction ends and healing begins. Listen to me. If your loved one needs help, give them a call. Reach out. 801-800-8142. Just like we do every week, let's start this thing off with new and good. Dr. Sellers, you want to kick us off with what's new and good?
Yeah, I do, but I don't know what's new and good. So, new and good for me this week. Well, I was down in St. George last week with a really good friend who was on the podcast and got to play some golf. That was new and good, although it was kind of cold and rainy last weekend too.
Yeah, it's a thing.
The other thing is for me, I have a brother that's 2 years younger than me that passed away from alcoholism. And his birthday was this week. It was a little rough for me, but also reminded me that I'm happy that I'm here and not using and I don't have much chance of dying tomorrow.
Love that. Love that. And happy birthday to your brother.
Yeah.
Shining down.
Thanks.
All right. Tia, what's new and good in your world?
Wow. New and good. Well, being here, this is interesting. You asked me to be here a while ago, and I was like, yeah, sure.
The day has come.
Now here it is a month later, and I'm like, oh, wow, it's here. So that's where we're at with this. And good. Today is a fantastic day. I get to celebrate with one of my best friends, a milestone in her life with her recovery.
Nice.
I got to wake up and have a great morning with her, and yeah, we've been doing this road to recovery together, and she's celebrating a milestone, and it's pretty awesome. So that's good in my life today.
Yeah, that's so cool. Isn't connection so much fun, right?
Oh,
like when you
love it.
Yeah, when you see other people hit those milestones, and it kind of inspires you and motivates you to do the same thing.
Yeah, so shout out to Shelly. Woo woo.
Love it. Shout out to Shelly.
Yeah.
All right. Sean Donovan, what's new and good in the world of Sean Donovan?
Yeah, just busy as always. Got my side hustles. Got another side hustle.
Just lining them up and knocking
Another
them down.
trip out of town to do some stuff. So, hey, I'm
Where are you going?
back to Washington.
Okay.
Yeah, so I get to build 2 studios for a radio station. So it's exciting for me.
Sean loses
That's my
some
new
weight
good.
and becomes a rock star.
Oh, that's
See
right.
how that
I'm
happens?
down 27 pounds now.
Nice.
Really?
Boom.
Since when?
I don't know, November-ish.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Love it.
Nice.
Nice.
All right, let's jump into this thing. All right, question number 1. Are you ready?
Sure. Let's hear
Okay.
it.
Okay. So tell our listeners, who is Tia Bithell?
Tia Bithell. I am a St. George native.
Local. Love that.
Local. I am a mom. I have 3 kids. I am a grandma.
What? No
I
way.
know,
You're way too young to be a
yes.
grandma.
I know. It's fabulous.
Don't try to tell that lie.
I know. Oh, he's the best.
They are the best.
Yeah, I got my head start to motherhood pretty early. Yeah.
Get it done then. Good for you,
Yeah,
right? Like, let's
yeah.
get this done.
That's right. Yeah, I started very early, and I've watched my kids go past that age without having kids, and it's like, wow.
How old were you when your first kid was born?
I was 15.
That's young.
Yeah, I was moved out, had my own kid, car, place, and husband before I had my license, or 16.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. That's a unique story.
Yes.
It's pretty sweet.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Kids are great.
So, tell me about your kids, like names and ages.
Thane is 25. He is married to Nancy, and they have my grandson, Brantley.
Sweet.
And they live in Alaska.
Whoa.
Yes, that part's not so fun. They're in the military. And hopefully next year they'll be able to come home, or at least closer to home. My next one is Tristan, and he is married to Lexi, and they live in Cedar, and he's 24.
A little closer than Alaska.
Yes, and he comes home quite a bit more, so that's great. He and Lexi come all the time. And then I have my youngest is Hadley, and she just turned 16. And yeah, she keeps me on my toes, keeps me very busy.
Nice.
Yeah, we have a fun story about her. I mean, they all come with fun stories, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we got y'all warmed up now.
Yeah.
We're just going to dive right into it.
Okay.
All right. So this is a podcast about addiction, recovery from addiction, though. We like to emphasize the recovery part, right? Keep it light, not dark and heavy. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's what makes us different from other addiction podcasts. So tell me, can you pinpoint what it was that led to your addiction? Like when you think back, is there a certain event or, I don't know, childhood? Like what was it for you that led to your addiction?
I always felt different growing up. My parents were divorced. I never really blamed it on that, but I always felt different. I don't know if this makes sense, but sometimes in school, like they'd be going on to the next subject or talking about the next thing, and I'd be like, did I just miss this whole last, I don't know, quarter of everything they just learned? Because I didn't catch on to what they were saying, or I just missed it. I just never felt like I fit in or knew what was going on.
Yeah, no, I totally can relate. Sometimes I'll be reading a book and I'll read an entire page and then think to myself, what did I just read?
Oh, yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah. It just never felt like I fit in with the crowd, and we lived in here, Richfield, and then my parents divorced and we moved down here when I was in 4th grade. So I always felt like I just never really fit in with everybody in elementary, when in all reality, that was just me. That was just my head telling me, and my disease. I think it was just started at a young age, As far as the addiction, I think I've always drank alcoholically. I always taken, pills or anything like that. I just always took them.
Yeah,
not as directed.
Right, moderation's never been something you've been able to, I guess, do, right? Like, no. What do they say? Social drinking hasn't exactly worked for you. You don't know what that looks like.
No.
All right, so let's dive into that without glorifying or war storying. Share with us kind of what was your darkest days? What did they look like? How did it feel? Like you kind of led into it, right? You struggled with alcohol, and when you say pills, opiates, uppers, downers, what was?
Yeah, definitely. Alcohol was always my go-to. Drugs are part of my story. Way back in the day, got heavy into some of the party drugs, and there's a lot of crazy stories there. But alcohol was always my go-to and the one that would fix everything for me. drawing a blank here for a second. Yeah, I felt like it would solve everything, you know. I was going through a divorce, and I turned to alcohol for everything.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like just psychopharmaceutical, right? Dr. Sellers, like we know uppers and downers, right? Different chemicals react differently in our brains as far as that goes. And I find that opiates and alcohol, they're both depressants. Mm-hmm. And for me, I kind of put it in this category of a way to numb, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's a way to kind of numb up, separate from reality. Is that true for you?
Oh yeah. I have a bad back, and that's where a lot of it started too, is I had started with the pills for my back and all of those issues. And then the pills would run out so fast, and then I would turn to the alcohol, and, you know, and then it becomes the juggling act, you know, the pills are gone in a couple of days. And so then you run to the alcohol, and then it's just the back and forth game. And, I just completely lost myself in all of that. I didn't know who I was any longer. You know, I became this person that I didn't even know who I was looking in the mirror any longer. I wasn't the mom that I knew I could be, and that you
wanted to be.
Right.
At what age did it really become apparent that you like had a serious problem, right? Because like you said, you kind of, people will dabble or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Just kind of a social thing. Mm-hmm. But then I feel like in addiction, there's one common thing. There comes a point where you can't stop, right? Like when you actively try and you just can't.
Right.
Like, so age of first use, and when did that identify for you?
Age of first use, I think I was about 14. And that was just little things here and there. But coming up on when it became a real big problem, I would say when it was about 10 years ago, became really bad and then 8 years ago, it was out of control. 7 years ago, I would say, tried to stop.
Yeah.
Made an effort of trying to stop. I went through some really, really, really traumatic things. I suffer from some severe PTSD. I was in a really bad robbery.
Oh, man.
Which, you know, I've sought other help to take care of a lot of those things. And I don't think, you know, my drinking didn't come.
I want to hear about the robbery. Are you comfortable sharing about that?
Yeah, I don't know if we have a lot of time for that, but
give us kind of a summary.
We got some time.
Yeah.
It was just, you know, at work, and it was really bad.
So Tia works at a bank to kind of make those connections, right?
Yeah, but I was trying to get sober at that time, and then when all of that happened, it just kind of put me into a tailspin, and I really couldn't get a grip on my recovery at that point. And I did seek treatment after that. I went and put myself into residential treatment a little bit later after that.
Okay, so how long has it been since that incident happened, since the robbery happened?
It was on September 11th. Has it been 7 years now? I'd have to sit and do the calculations. I haven't even thought that far right now. Some years I do great, and some years I don't. And that's the funny thing about PTSD. Yeah. You know, it's a whole different ballgame versus my alcoholism, you know, and I have no control over that.
Yeah, definitely separate from a substance abuse disorder, right?
Completely.
So do you ever, this is probably a dumb question, but do you ever get nervous? No. Like it's your job now? Like, is that PTSD? Like, what are some things that can kick up your PTSD if you're at work that makes you kind of relive that or have those feelings come back?
Well, that's a real funny thing too, is because my God has quite the sense of humor. This whole virus thing has been really fun. having people come in with masks.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And the cold weather and the beanies and all of that fun stuff has been really entertaining. But we went through a period where the doors were locked and we were just letting people in by appointment. And so that really did a lot of healing for me. I switched desks, and we were able to let people in at will, by appointment. And I was able to work on that. I moved desks, and I just kind of have worked on my anxiety.
You've kind of eased back into it.
Yeah. And I work with other, doctors, different things, and, I feel in a very, very good place with it right now. I'm in a good place in my recovery. Was it last year? No, 2 years ago it'll be, a year and a half ago on the anniversary, I didn't handle it very well. Last year, I handled it just fine. But that's that on on the robbery. I mean.
Got you. Cool. But it's definitely part of your story.
Yeah, it was huge.
Go ahead, Sellers.
I got a couple of quick observations and maybe a question. But the first thing that I heard that I want to point out that I like to recap sometimes some of the things that we learn. But you said I felt different. And I think we've done 26 episodes and probably 24 people have said I felt differently. I felt different than the other kids in my class or other kids my age. That's a really, really common theme. So the problem is people that feel different feel alone. But from what I'm learning from this podcast, they're not the only people out there that feel different. There are actually quite a few people that feel different. So maybe feeling different is the norm rather than the exception. Second thing that I heard that I've been listening to people's stories for a while now, and rarely do. I'm sorry, my phone is. I thought it was on silent. Rarely do you hear people who drink alcohol and use opiates at the same time. Like that doesn't seem to be a very popular combination. And you mentioned because they're both downers, and I think that it's maybe a little too much. But you mentioned that you kind of switched them off when you had plenty of whatever your opiate was. That was fine, and then when you didn't, you turned back to alcohol. But they're not mixed very often, which is an interesting thing, I think. I can't remember what my question was though, so I'm going to let you keep moving on.
Okay.
Oh no, my third observation was really, I've thought about your trauma from the standpoint of a customer, not from the standpoint of a bank teller. But I've walked into a bank now in a mask, thinking, what would have happened if I would have walked into a bank with a mask 2 years ago? I might have gotten shot. And now you can't go in without the mask. So I've thought about it from the customer standpoint. But man, what does a bank teller think who's been involved in a robbery with a guy that wears a mask? That just sounds really traumatic to relive every day.
Yeah, kind of a crazy story. So I went out to lunch with a cousin of mine who works in law enforcement. He's actually a police officer for Springville. Anyways, one of those towns by St. George. Jake Boakley's his name. And he was saying that he was standing in line at the bank and he had a hat on, a mask on, and it dawned on he always carries a firearm, right? He works in law enforcement, and it dawned on him, how crazy is this? I'm in a bank with a hat on, a mask on, and I have my side piece attached to me. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I'm across the bank at my desk, and there's been multiple times I'll jump up and be like, ooh, like throw that off, get off, or I'll hurry and type to my tellers, take them off. And they're really good about asking them, can you please pull those down so we can identify you? And
yeah, that's an interesting spin on the whole COVID thing. And yeah that's cool. Sure. The story was meant to be told.
That's why I say God has a real funny sense of humor for me, because it's taken me a lot of years to get through a lot of this. And since my relapse almost 18 months ago, it's 16 and a half months ago, it's just totally been different this time. And I have been able to do so much more work, and it feels amazing. And there's been all these other, because that PTSD is such a different trauma that it has a whole different set of work on it, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like
And
a tree. There's the stump part, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but then there's different branches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's given me that whole other opportunity to work. And it's beautiful.
That's cool. That's way cool.
Yeah.
So Tia is actually considered, well, would 16 months be considered early recovery? Still kind of.
I still claim it early.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been around for quite a while, you know, and I've had time and I've relapsed. And
what was that like for you? Like, what did that look like? Because we kind of talked about it before we started recording. You would, right? I call it the tumble dry, right? Where you just you're stuck in that loop.
Mm-hmm.
So about how many times, if you can think of, how many times have you said, you know what, enough's enough, and then you've gotten to a point where something happens and you just go right back?
I had three pretty serious relapses there right in a row. Like, and I would have time and then relapse and then just right, boom, 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 you know. This last one I had, I would say about, I think it was like 6 or 8 months. And then my relapse was only 2 weeks long, but it was bad. It was, you know.
When you say bad, paint us a picture, because I know you can see it in your head, but what did that look like?
Almost 2 weeks worth being out there just drinking nonstop, but I ended up in the hospital back in ICU I was in the hospital for almost 2 weeks. And I mean, I was pretty much dead. I had pancreatitis. It was ugly.
Yeah. Alcohol's a vicious one, right, Dr. Sellers?
Yeah, that's common. The damage that we do to our bodies from drinking accumulates over time. And even if you put some clean time together, the damage heals for the most part. But if you take another drink, it goes right back to where the damage was, and you start from there. Absolutely. So it's an interesting phenomenon when you say I drank for 2 weeks, but then I spent 2 weeks in the ICU. Mm-hmm. But that's an accumulation of damage over time.
Right. Yeah. Right. It was bad.
So Tia, what did your rock bottom or spiritual awakening look like? Like, let's try. We got a couple minutes left here in part one, so let's make the transition. So, what was your rock bottom, would you say, or that spiritual awakening? Was it the hospital? Was it?
You know, I have two. Okay. I have two of them. That one, since we're talking about that, and I do want to touch base on the other one, but maybe we can share that one when we get back. But this one is being at that rock bottom and feeling like I couldn't go on. Like I had been at the point where I knew what recovery looked like. I knew what I wanted, and I knew how good it felt, but I couldn't stop drinking, you know. And being in the hospital and my family not being able to come there, I'm pretty sure they were just kind of at wit's end, not really knowing what to do with me anymore. Right. And an entire group of my dear friends and group of people that are in my close recovery community showing up for me, and they all just gathered around in my hospital. As soon as I was out of ICU and back into just my own room, I don't think I would have had it in me, because I was so full of shame at that point. Yeah. That shame and guilt was just eating me alive. They all came into that hospital room. I mean, I don't think you could have fit another person in there.
Oh, wow.
And they showed up and just gathered with me and showed me so much love and support.
That was the most recent one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just loved me until I could love myself again, until I could, decide to show my face again.
Yeah. Yeah. Shame is definitely a big part of this thing. I always tell people nobody can be harder on me than I'll be on myself. I promise you that. Any takeaway thoughts, Dr. Sellers?
Well, we got 16 seconds left, so I don't have much of a thought, but this is a common story for sure.
Thank you. All right, you guys been listening to episode 26 of We Do Recover featuring Tia Bithell. Join us in part 2 to get her comeback in life and recovery today.
You are listening to We Do Recover with Jared Miller and co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers. We'll be right back after this short break with more of We Do Recover with Jared Miller, sponsored by Steps Recovery Center and the Hilton Garden Inn.
I'm Desmond Lomax, one of the clinical executives here at Steps Recovery, and once you become in the Steps family, you're just a part of the Steps family. A lot of us have overcome substances, overcome addiction, and now we're able to help other people. Second of all, we're also going to help you in a way where you can afford to be helped. Third of all, we're going to give you the same quality that many organizations are charging 2 to 3 times, and it's more about you than it is about our organization.
We welcome you back to We Do Recover with Jared Miller, co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers. Brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn. And now with part 2 of our podcast, Jared Miller and Dr. Terry Sellers.
And welcome back. This is episode 26 of We Do Recover. We're talking about Tia Bithell. It's a fantastic story she shared about things that she struggled with in part 1. We're going to dive into her story, her life in recovery today here in part 2. But before we get to that, let's do a sponsorship mention. Episode 26, part 2 is brought to you by Hilton Garden Inn in St. George, Utah. It's always sunny and bright at the Hilton Garden Inn in St. George, Utah. If you're traveling through southern Utah, give them a Google search. Just type in Hilton Garden Inn. I promise you won't regret it. They have amazing amenities. They're awesome. Love them. All right. Any thoughts, Dr. Sellers, before we get...
Nope. I love the Hilton Garden Inn. Thanks for helping out with the podcast.
Awesome. Okay. So you said that in part 1 that you wanted to talk about your rock bottom in the previous one. So I'm going to give you the choice here. Do you want to go back and shed some light on that, or do you want to jump into part 2?
No, I want to hear the second one.
Okay. So
I know you weren't asking me, but I want to hear the second one.
Tell us what your first rock bottom looked like and how long ago. Yeah.
Okay, so this one was it was about 4.5 years ago.
Okay.
And I was just that whole pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. Bottom, I could not stop drinking to save my life. I was literally
drinking myself
to death. Yes, like
that's how you
constantly
end up in the hospital for 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yes.
Doing that same thing then too. And I had finally reached the point where I had reached out for help. And at that point, my life it was not very pretty.
Unmanageable.
Very, very unmanageable.
Hey.
And I reached out for help, and lots of moving parts to it. But my son was graduating from the Army, and we had already had tickets and everything ready for the graduation, for flights, for hotel and everything. But I was able to get into treatment, and I went to treatment up north, but I wasn't going to miss that graduation because,
okay.
I was still in control.
Right. Yep.
So there's still a little bit there. Anyway, long story short, my dad and sister were going with me to the graduation, and my dad was going to be with me the whole time and then take me right in after the trip and take me right into treatment.
Wait, right in or right back? So you wanted
right
to do
back.
that before, or had you
Yes.
been in treatment?
No,
Okay, so
I was not in treatment. We were going on to the graduation and then take me from there to treatment.
Okay.
We know how it's dangerous to quit drinking.
Yeah, DTs are a real thing.
Yeah. So I grew up, my family's very LDS family. And
We have that in common.
Yes. And my dad has never had a drink in his life. He's never been around it. He's never touched it, anything. And I was trying very, really to not have a drink that day when he was coming to pick me up. And by the time he got there, DTs were sinking in really, really bad. And I was not in good shape. And we were heading to Vegas to get on the flight, and I was not doing too hot. We made it to Valley of Fire, and I was bad shape, and I couldn't take it anymore. I'm like, we've got to pull over. I've got to go in here and get a drink. And so I go in and I just buy a couple of little bottles, and to get me to Vegas so I can get a bigger bottle, make it through the night, the story. And so I run in, I grab a bunch, and I run in the bathroom to drink them, knowing they're just barely going to take the edge off. And so I go drink a couple. The last one will not open.
Crazy.
It won't at all. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Is that just because you were shaking so bad, you think?
No. And I am like, I yelled at my sister to have her try. She couldn't open it. I'm like, whatever. So, I mean, at this point, I don't know if I had even accepted the fact that I was a real alcoholic.
Wow.
I knew that I didn't love myself. I did not love myself. I didn't love the person that was staring at me in the mirror. So I went out to the car, and I'm like, Dad, I can't open this.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
I hand it to him, and he's like, well, and he takes that, and he opens it.
That's
and it
unconditional
took some crying,
love.
and he takes it. And I will tell you, at that moment, I felt human,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I felt the love of my dad. I felt the love of God, and I knew that it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And my dad was so cute that whole entire trip, and he made sure that I had something the entire trip. Are you going to be okay? Can I get you anything else? You got enough to make it through this? And from that moment on, that was kind of another,
So your dad had enough
God
empathy and enough kindness to get you at least over the bridge until he could truly help you.
Yeah. And he knew that there was an end in sight.
Right.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Your dad's my new favorite guy.
I know.
Man. What a good dude. And how hard would that have been, Sellers, to I don't know that I could have went to my mom and said, hey.
Right. How humiliating is that you in front of maybe, listen, sometimes our dads are our heroes or our moms or whichever, but and you don't want to disappoint them, and to have to do that in front of him must have just been really, really humiliating. But also, if you can't realize you're an alcoholic at that point, then you're definitely in denial for sure. Because that must have been tough. Like, I can't even imagine going to one of my parents and saying, hey, can you open this bottle for me?
Yeah.
But what a hero he was at that point. I
mean, well, and he's a mortician, and he's seen so many times the other side of it, and is just, and I don't ever want to have to put my family through that and have them see me on that end.
Yeah. I bet that was extremely humbling.
Yeah,
I'm so glad we went back and got this second rock bottom, or the first rock bottom. But
thanks for letting me share that. Thank
you.
No,
that's the moments that we're looking for, is those pit of the stomach moments that, and again, we don't like to dwell on that, but I think everybody can relate to something like that. But that just sounds really, really difficult.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And my hope is listeners will hear that and go, holy cow. How raw is that, right? How cool is that? And they'll draw some hope from that. Definitely. All right. Well, let's switch gears and let's get into, what did kind of your road to recovery?
So tell me, where'd you go to treatment?
Yeah.
I went to treatment up in Pleasant Grove, and I went to Willow Tree.
Oh, I love Willow Tree.
Me too. I went there twice.
Two times.
Listen, first of all, we love anybody in the whole community who helps people out, and Willow Tree for sure does that. So we don't mean to be an advertisement for anybody, but I think there's room for mentioning people's road to recovery and how they got there. I love Willow Tree.
Me too.
Yeah. And listen, I know Ty, one of the owners of Steps, and he isn't a limited resource world mentality kind of guy.
Right.
Like I in my own security asked him one time, I was like, does it bother you that we mention other places? And he's like, heck no, I know those people. I love those people. That's awesome.
Yeah, if you don't love Jake Forsyth, you don't know you don't know
Right.
anything. He's a good guy.
Yeah, Jake was amazing through all of
He
it.
is.
Okay, so tell us how your road to recovery, how did you begin to pick up these pieces and start to kind of put them back together? And it sounds like it was a slow process and you stumbled a little bit, but eventually.
I did what they suggested. You know, they gave me some suggestions and I took them. Whoa, why did I hear that? I got a mentor in my life and she gives me a lot of suggestions and I go with those. I am of service. Service has definitely kept me sober. Speaking of other treatment centers, I go go and visit the other treatment centers weekly.
Way cool. To do what? To
just go out, be of service out there.
Connection, right?
Yeah,
community.
connection.
Good.
Yes. But I think that's been the biggest part for me is to just be of service and to be there for, the next suffering alcoholic. Just to be there and if they need help or to talk to somebody. Whatever I can do to get outside of myself and to quit thinking about me and to do something for somebody else. That's been a big, big thing for me.
And it feels so good, right?
Yeah.
It really does.
It does.
Yeah, I remember the last time I saw you, we were doing the service project for USARA. We were cleaning up the park.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you this, I was grumpy on the way there. I was like, man, I got a condo I could be cleaning right now. I could be washing my truck. And then afterwards I thought, man, I love that. It was good. It's a lot of feel good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. What amends have you made or are you in the process of making?
Yes. I have a lot of amends to make, which I'm still working on. But most importantly is just my living amends, which I will be doing till the day I die for my, with my children. There was a lot that happened after my last relapse. My one son and I were not speaking. He was very disappointed. He didn't want to have a drunk grandma, for his son, which I do not blame him one bit. Yeah.
It's understandable.
Yeah. When my last relapse had happened, it was around the anniversary of that robbery. My son was being deployed. There was a whole snowball of everything, and I can blame it on a million different things because I'm an alcoholic and I've got excuses as the day is long,
Yep.
But
totally
it all
relate.
comes down to, my spiritually fit condition I was bankrupt at that moment.
Yeah.
I had let my guard down and I was not taking care of my recovery program. And I had all of those things come at me at once and I wasn't prepared.
What does that mean to you? I'm going to pause you real quick. What does it mean to you to take care of your recovery program? Because we've talked about this on the podcast, and I know I've probably beat it like a dead horse, but like we believe in bio, right? Physical, psycho or emotional, social, and for a lot of us, spiritual. So when you say I wasn't, right, like what does it look like? Let's transition it to what do you do today in those areas that help your recovery?
Definitely praying, reaching out, working with my, mentor, whatever we want to call, some special people in my life.
There you go.
I work a honest plan of recovery and I work it daily,
Yeah.
There's certain things that I do with that. How do I do this? I work a plan in my recovery.
You work a 12-step plan.
Yeah.
You can do that without giving away the group.
I work in a plan that's a little anonymous.
Yeah,
and so
I respect what you're doing here.
It's traditions.
So in what ways, so you mentioned you're making amends with your son. Mm-hmm. In what ways do you try to go about that? Because similar, right? Like, I want you to be able to feel like you can relate here. I mean, it's been years for me, and there's still some people that I'm trying to make amends with. I realized today, this kind of dawned on me. I do family groups at Steps, part of my internship, and I see these strong connections with families. And in a way, I kind of think like, man, some of my family connections are superficial. They are.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, hey, how are you? I'm good. How are you? Right? Like, and we move on. And so just last night, I shot my brother a text and said, hey, man, I know I only contact you when I need things. I know I've not been a great brother. Can we talk on a more regular basis? So that's an example. What's an example for you of amends that you're trying to make?
Effort. And it's just that continuous effort. Mine is continuing and showing up every day and doing those things. Like I was saying, we hadn't spoke. We literally hadn't spoken almost 2 years.
Wow.
Since he deployed. And he came home for Christmas with his wife and his son. I have a great relationship with his wife and my grandson, and we talk and FaceTime all the time. Well, he was deployed. He came home. I went up and saw them and everything. We hadn't talked. And then the day before they came for Christmas, he called me. And we're still working on that relationship, but just by doing what I need to do and taking care of my life. And it's just time. Time takes time.
Yeah. Time, effort, and proof, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yep. I love it.
Yeah.
Got anything you want to share on that, Dr. Sellers? Amends?
No, but I love making them. I do sort of love making them. Like, I haven't really had trouble once I have been confronted with my issues. I don't have a lot of trouble standing up and saying, yeah, I really screwed that one up, or I really blew that, or like, I think it's very cathartic to get that stuff out. I think that helps you more than it helps the person you're making amends to.
Definitely.
Like, it's a great part of growth.
Yeah. That doesn't always cure it, though.
No.
Like, you can say you're sorry, but that doesn't always
hurt. Well,
yeah.
Here's the thing. The amends need to be really be for you, right? People get to be as upset as they want to about kind of the things that we offended them in, and we don't have any control over how they react to the amends. And that's really none of our business, how they react to the amends. But we make them, and then you keep living them, like Tia said, like her living amends. You keep doing that, you will eventually be forgiven. But what time frame that is not, it's not up to us. That's up to the person that we have somehow offended.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's okay if they don't grant. Listen, for me, I've offended people all my life, but based on drugs, I offended people for about a decade. Well, then I get clean, and I expect that all of a sudden they're going to start trusting me like the day I get clean, right? I've ruined that trust for 10 years, and then think on day one when I haven't used an opiate finally, all of a sudden everybody should trust me again, and that's just not how it works.
Yeah, we've conditioned them to think that way, right? Like we've trained them to not trust us, or
take a decade. It might take longer. I don't know, but that's none of my business. My business is, what am I doing to make things right? And if I'm on that, if I'm clean and keeping my side of the street clean, then the rest will take care of itself in God's time.
Yeah, I love that. Yep. And that's kind of tough too, because I feel like, so we know social is important, and what's at the core of social? It's family, right? Like, family is important. And so I understand that, and Dr. Sellers is absolutely correct. Like, it's on their time. It's just a tough thing, because a lot of us, that can be sometimes things that will make you go back out, right? Is the idea of, well, if I'm always just going to be labeled the addict or the, alcoholic or the black sheep in the family, like, right? And that's the wrong way to look at it, but people do fall into that pitfall.
Right.
Absolutely. So
it
awesome.
does go away, though. A quick example from my life. After I was finally found out to be a drug addict, right, I was still working and delivering babies. And every once in a while, narcotics go missing from the hospital. And it was so uncomfortable to me every time that happened, because I'm thinking, well, for sure they think it's me, right? Because
Right.
because I'm the drug addict and I'm the known drug addict in the room. So for sure they think I probably stole them. And that goes away. That goes away all the time. We have, on rare occasions at treatment centers where I work, things will come up missing, which are controlled substances. I'm not really worried about that anymore. If I don't think anybody thinks it's me anymore. Number one, and number two, if they did, I can do a drug test and pass it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Okay. Tia.
Yes.
What does your life in recovery after 16 and a half months look like today? Like, what do you do for fun? What do you do, to blow off some steam, or to just, get some inner peace, whatever direction you want to take us in?
Life today's good. Life today's beautiful. It's just more calm and serene. I have more calmness now than I think I ever have. I don't have to live in that 3-ring circus that I always did before.
Great point. Yep.
That I was always planning the drink. That's all life was. I just get to show up nowadays. I get to be the mom that's involved and coherent.
Right. That's actually present.
Right.
I like it.
Yeah. I'm really involved with my friends in the recovery community. I had, my family. I get to do things. They can depend on me. I'm just a single mom that just enjoys life and, bought myself a little house and just enjoying it, being a little grandma. Can't wait till he moves closer. And I don't know, life is just good.
Yeah, life is good.
I'm
and
just
Tia's so
blessed.
cute. She's trying to be so respectful because, in NAA, they talk about being anonymous in news, radio, and film. And so I love it, but that's a big part of, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. People can get mad at me. That's a big part of your recovery today, right? Yeah. Is those people and those organizations that have helped you and come around and been a good community for you, as well as your family. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that.
Definitely.
You're awesome. I'll be the one to get in trouble for that. No worries. No worries.
Can I talk about that for a second, though?
Yeah.
Anonymity is, we don't have to remain anonymous about our own recovery.
Good point.
Right. We cannot reveal someone else's. Anything we heard in the rooms of AA or NA stays there, and that's their story to tell, not ours. But we can talk about our story all we want. Sometimes people lean on that anonymity and say, well, I can't really talk about that. Well, yes, you can. If it's your story, you can talk about it all you want, because anonymous just means you can't out someone else, or you can't talk about somebody else's story. But your story's your story. You can shout it from the rooftops if you want to.
Yeah, great point.
I don't recommend it always. There seem to be times and places that are better than shouting from the rooftops, but you can do it.
True. And I am very open about my story and my part of it, because I want to be there if anybody ever needs help, or any other woman out there needs help in recovery.
To give back freely what was given to you.
Definitely.
See, I know. Come on, give me some. I love it.
That's the concept right there, though, right? That's what your story does, is just remember, when we go back to the beginning of your story, I always felt different. Now, when you open up and tell your story now, other people who felt different can identify with your story and start to feel a connection, which is the freeing part of telling your story, is allowing other people to see, hey, maybe I wasn't alone. Maybe I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And this makes Dr. Sellers super uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it anyways. I got to give credit to him. Like, we give each other a hard time, right? And we're total opposites, but I love this man. Mm-hmm. I really do. Like a mentor, like as a father figure. A couple of years ago, he changed my life because he shared his story with me, which gave me permission to share my story with him. And ever since then, we've been on this pathway of,
being
able to.
Here we are, baby.
Collaborate together. So got to give him props. Got to give him props.
Thank you. That's kind to say.
Wonderful.
All right. So to take us out in what is your journey in recovery and through addiction, what has it taught you? And what does it mean when I like the title of this is We Do Recover? What does that mean to you?
We do recover. Well, first, and what I've learned is that addiction does not discriminate.
Oh, absolutely not.
And I love that people that come into the rooms wherever, you may learn.
Whatever rooms you may go in.
Wherever you're going. There's just no judgment, There's zero judgment, I think, because we've all been through it. We've just gone through the depths, and we know what it's like. And so we're willing to be there and to reach our hand out and to help somebody and just pull them up and help them. I know that I wouldn't be where I'm at without other people in recovery. And we do recover. We're, it's worth it.
We're moms
Definitely.
and dads and
Yes.
people with jobs. Tia, thank you so much for coming on and being brave to share your story. I know this isn't the easiest thing to do, hanging out with a couple knuckleheads like us, but we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Join us next week for episode 27. Dr. Sellers will be in house.
Thank you for joining us today on We Do Recover with Jared Miller.
Help us spread our message of hope. Like, comment, and share.
If you have any topics or ideas for future shows, please share that on our Facebook page.
That Facebook page is We Do Recover with Jared Miller. If you or a loved one needs help, please reach out to us. Again, thank you for listening. Brought to you by Steps Recovery Center and the St. George Hilton Garden Inn. This has been a production from a podcast studio.